What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Blerd It Out. So we got the new One Piece chapter, 1116 Conflict. And this was a pretty decent chapter as far as like all of the story and lore goes. Now I know we've been getting like chapter after chapter after chapter of Vegapunk kind of monologuing the reveals that he has for the world. And like I've seen on the timeline, some people are getting tired of it, specifically seeing the reactions from people, which is such a weird concept to me, because why would you be tired of seeing this massive world react to this massive news? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. But we're getting a little bit more of that in this chapter here. And I have a lot to talk about for this chapter. And I think I mentioned in the previous episode that I was going to talk about some other anime and stuff. But I noticed that one, I already did that in a previous a previous episode. And two, I have a few things to say about this chapter. So I think I'm just going to have this episode centered on this chapter. And we'll see. If there's time in the end, I may step aside to some other stuff. But I have a lot to talk about with this chapter. So let's get into it. First off, a word from our sponsors. Thank you for tuning in to Blerd It Out. Whether you're listening from YouTube on my channels like Taran King Kuma or Blerd It Out Podcast, or one of the many podcast sites like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more, I appreciate your support. If you want to listen to older episodes of the podcast, head on over to Patreon. If you join as a free member, you can watch all the old episodes from the old seasons for free. Plus, there'll be other content that didn't quite make it to an episode or on a YouTube video that you can check out there as well. Your support means the world. And as always, if you have not read the latest chapter, watched the latest episodes, be warned, there are spoilers ahead.
Spoilers.
The cover story is just the continuation of Yamato's pilgrimage, and this time we're visiting Otsuru, and she's given out some food for Yamato to take with her. Now, nothing super impressive here, but it just reminds me how insanely big Yamato is as a person. Otsuru is also tall because Kinemon was also tall. Otsuru was like 6 foot. Yamato was like 9-10 feet tall. Absolutely huge. It's just insane to see like the size difference. Like Otsuru literally comes up to Yamato's waist, and she's about as thin or as thick as one of Yamato's legs. It's insane. But into the chapter, we get a real quick jump to Imu. And some interesting stuff going on here with Imu, because we have kind of background dialogue of the world talking about what Vegapunk said last time, and that the war is still ongoing. So they're like, how is the war ongoing? No one from that time era is even alive today. And of course, as they're saying that, we're seeing Imu. And not only are we seeing Imu, but we're seeing Imu in a picture of who I'm guessing is Nefertari Lily. Now, all of the Nefertaris, I guess I shouldn't say all, Vivi and Lily look the same. So, who this is, I'm not entirely sure. It's a Nefertari for sure. That's what we know. And it's so weird, because why does Imu have a giant picture of a Nefertari in their room, in this flower room? Not only that, but the fact that they said no one from back then is even alive today. And then we cut to this. I feel like it's a very directed point that Imu might either be Nefertari Lily, or Imu is someone directly related to her from that time period that exists today. Like that's the setup we're getting here, is that Imu is from that period one way or another. Whether Imu is actually Lily, or whether Imu is related to Lily, affiliate with Lily in some way, they are connected. Imu's from that time period. That's what we're getting from this. Now we get one more. We get a panel like Imu's eye, and then we get the text Vegapunk. And I really want to know if that's Imu, or if that's what's going on in, because the panel right next to it is Alabasta. So I'm wondering if that's Imu doing something, or if that's them reacting in Alabasta. I'm not entirely sure. I would imagine it's Alabasta, because Imu hasn't said, I don't think, anything since the since they've been revealed. So, and I mean, when we cut to Alabasto, we get Igaram and Karoo, and they're looking at the missing posters of Vivi. And it doesn't seem like they'd be reacting to Vegapunk that way if they're looking like this, because he's crying and sad. Karoo is crying and sad too, so it doesn't seem like they were the ones that reacted. And then we also have a painting from what I believe is Cobra's tomb. I see there's a giant picture of Cobra, and then there's what looks like a coffin, sarcophagus type thing, chilling in the center of the room with everyone around it, Chaka and Pell, and everyone's kind of just listening to the broadcast. And now moving on, we get Vegapunk revealing that he created the Mother Flame, and that he wants it to be something that sustains the world in a positive way. Fortunately, part of it was stolen and used very recently. I mean, like recently, within like the last 2 weeks, I think he says. And he explains that the Mother Flame was used in what eventually happens to Lelouch. Now, before we get to that, we get a brief few panels of Stussy and Edison talking. And Stussy's still having this kind of inner conflict herself about, working with CP0, working for Vegapunk, being a double agent. Basically, Stussy doesn't know what to do. She wants to free Kaku, and she's kind of assuring that if I free him, he's not going to be a problem. Now, the thing about Kaku, and the reason that I've always liked Kaku the most of all the CP0, is that Kaku still seems the most, I would say, like, human of the group. Like, they were all so disconnected, especially when they switched to their like official CP9 persona, that when Kaku got defeated by Zoro, he seemed genuinely remorseful for like choosing the life of an assassin. Like, he legit seemed like he enjoyed being a shipwright. That he was having so much fun being what I think they called him, like the mountain wind. Like, that was his deal. He was enjoying that. And so when he eventually had to do like his job, it felt very bittersweet at the end, because it's like, okay, yeah, we defeated him, we got the key, we can save Robin, but it's like, dang, this dude's kind of just, he's doing his job. It doesn't seem like he wants to do this job. It seems like he wants to do other stuff. And I feel that same energy here, because Stussy's talking about like letting Kaku go and stuff. And if you look at his face, it's like, it's almost sad. Like he's feeling some type of way about how Stussy's feeling. Because Stussy is struggling. Stussy's like, why am I even still alive at this point? And she's basically trying to find like some final purposes for her life. And one of those things is like letting Kaku go. And she's like, let's let him go. He's not going to mess up anything. It's the least I can do. And Edison even talks about how she's clearly torn between operating with CP0 and operating with Vegapunk. Like, it's not that she solely has loyalty to one of those groups. She feels strongly about both of them. And Edison even makes a nice comment that the fact that she's so conflicted is proof that she's human, despite her being a clone of Buckingham Stussy from The Rocks. So it's like, you're a clone, but you're displaying these things that make you undoubtedly human. And I think that's really touching for her to hear. And I think that's going to motivate both her and Kaku to get up out of here, remain a group, and to continue working together with Lucci. I really want to see where this goes in particular. Like, initially I wasn't super interested in like how CP0 operated. I've become more interested in these three parts of CP0 in particular. I want to see how that works. But getting back to Vegapunk, he's talking about the Mother Flame and essentially what happened to Lelouch. Because no one knows that Lelouch got wiped out outside of the revolutionaries, because Sabo knows. So Vegapunk's talking about, we saw some activity happening over Lelouch, and then all of a sudden it stopped existing. And then the earthquakes happened. And once this news drops, we kind of get panels of like people going, wait, hold on, what? Lelouch? And we even have people like, I think we have Isabello being like, well, hold on, wait a minute, Lelouch is gone, it doesn't exist anymore. I need somebody to check that out. And it reminds me of kind of how Hiroshima went, where when Hiroshima was initially bombed, basically no one knew what had happened for a couple days because everyone that was there got wiped out. So essentially, there was no correspondence to say, like, hey, something happened here. And it just flew under the radar for a couple of days. The same thing happens here. The only people that would know would be Sabo and the revolutionaries, which honestly is something I want to talk about later on. But I feel like it's a missed opportunity. But we'll get to that. Essentially, Vegapunk apologizes for what happens here because he's taking blame because he feels partially responsible for what happened here. He created the Mother Flame, and essentially he let it get into the wrong hands. Whether you want to blame him, whether you want to blame York, however you want to look at it, it got into the wrong hands, and he's the one who created it. So he's beating himself up about that. But he's also saying, this proves my point that whatever's happening, whatever's causing the Steel to rise, not only is it man-made, but it's because of these ancient weapons. Now, he says that Joy Boy intended for the ancient weapons to be passed on to the future generations, which we figured based on what Roger figured out that Joy Boy had these things set up for a certain time. And this is where Vegapunk's message starts getting weird for me because he talks about, and he's been doing it for the majority of the message, that he's not positive who's good and who's evil. Now, the fact that he knows that Lugia was wiped out with an ancient weapon, and basically a bunch of people got murdered for no real reason, I feel like that points towards evil. Like, I don't think that's a stretch to say whoever did that isn't good. Even if it's for a greater purpose, you just eradicated an entire island of life. Like, that's, at some point you have to call that evil. And he goes on to say that the only people that really understand why these things are happening are the Roger pirates. And he says that they essentially know everything about this, but they didn't act. They didn't do anything. Why didn't they do anything? And this causes a tizzy with the world, because everyone's like, why do pirates know about these secrets? Why do pirates have this information? They're definitely going to use it for evil. And this is where I'm like, okay, Vegapunk, now you're causing a problem. Because here's the thing. Vegapunk doesn't really incriminate the world government as much as he should. Instead, he says that pirates know about the Void Century, that Joy Boy was a pirate, that Joy Boy created the ancient weapons, and the ancient weapons are causing this war. All in all, that paints pirates as the bad people. At some point, I think he does mention that the world government is who was opposing Joy Boy, but he never really states that the world government did anything inherently evil or was related to evil. Now, the reason that this, I guess, upsets me is because York says Vegapunk knew what was going on before all this kind of took place. She says that he knew about her stealing the fragment. He knew about what the government's plans were, whether it be like eradicating him, whether it be eradicating Lugia, whether it be using the ancient weapon, using the Mother Flame to power the ancient weapon. He knew that. He planned it, and he set up this entire scheme because he knew that. If he knew all that stuff, why didn't he mention that the world government was doing evil things? He can, he doesn't have to say that the world government is evil, but he can say that the world government is who is responsible for wiping out Lugia. Because at this point, it just sounds like the pirates are the ones doing all the nefarious stuff. And despite the world government not wanting this information to get out, it really hasn't painted them in a bad light quite yet. To us, the readers, yes, we see things differently. To the world of One Piece, they're pretty much getting fed the idea that a pirate created world-ending weapons and they're still being used. And the only people that know about it are other pirates. So it's like you're painting a really bad picture for piracy. And it doesn't seem like he's going to add more to this message that, I guess, puts a target on the world government's back. And I don't know why. it seems so odd because initially Vegapunk felt very neutral about, not siding with pirates or the world government. But from what he's talking about now, even if it's unintentional, it is painting a bad picture in the light of the pirates. Now, in her moment of introspection, York figures out where the Din Din Mushu is being hidden. In the Fabrio Stratum, which is being guarded by the Iron Giant that started moving a couple of chapters back. Now, how this all plays together, I'm still not entirely sure. Because York is trying to figure out too. She's like, what does this all mean? There's something that doesn't add up here because you set all this up as if you knew it was going to happen. But if you knew it was going to happen, why did things turn out this way? But essentially, he hit the broadcast now where the Iron Giant will be guarding it. How did he know that the Iron Giant would wake up? He would have to know that Joy Boy was back, right? Because as far as we can tell, the Iron Giant started moving around when Luffy went into Gear 5. It seemed like it was responding to the drum's liberation. Could be Mother Flame, but it seems a lot like it was responding to the drums. Not sure yet. At least I don't think they've had any clarifying points on that. And the ending of the chapter is Rayleigh. Of course, one of the only Rogers pirates we've seen outside of Crocus, who's also in this chapter, but it's really just a panel of him acknowledging the news, not saying anything. Rayleigh Lyon says, basically, Vegapunk's he's spoiling things. That's basically what he's saying, is Vegapunk is spoiling things for the new generation. And then he ends the chapter saying that the thrill is theirs to seek. So that's the chapter, and we're on break next week, so we're probably gonna have some deep speculation in upcoming days. But let's unpack this chapter a little bit. And let's start with Emu and Vivi and that entire connection. So we've been getting this kind of back and forth between Emu and the Nefertari family. Like Lily, and then Vivi was the one who was chosen to be eradicated. And it just seems like the Nefertari family, they have so much more to do with this than you would think. Because outside of just, not staying with the rest of the world, at some point they did fight against Joy Boy. The Nefertari family was one of the original 20 that fought against Joy Boy in the ancient civilization. So they must have had a reason for teaming up against that power. Now, when they broke off, why? Did they have the intention of avoiding conflict? Or was it more along the lines of, did Lily break off? Did the Nefertari family break off so that they could take on the role as basically the rulers of the world? So is it not that they broke off and went down to be human, but they broke off and rose to the pinnacle of what the world is? I think that's what we have to ask ourselves, because essentially Lily never came back. So once they broke off, and once that that final meeting ended, Lily never returned. So it's not like she broke off, went on to live as a human. It's that she broke off and then disappeared. And that's odd, considering that we have this giant picture of a Nefertari in the room where Emu is. It does strike me as weird that if Emu was Nefertari, that they would have a giant picture of themselves. So that the speculation is out there, but I think there's a lot leaning towards there's a deep connection between Emu and the Nefertari family. And surprisingly enough, that hasn't been included in Vegapunk's discussion. Now, this is something that I think this is where we need Robin. Not only has Robin read so many poneglyphs and has the horror research, but she's read the poneglyph they found in Alabasta. Now, the poneglyph there should have Alabasta's history in it. it should have information about, it's gotta have something about Lily, right? You would think that if she was the one who basically spearheaded the idea of the poneglyph storing knowledge, they have to have written about her somewhere. And why not the one in Alabasta? So I would love to see something like that come together where we look to Robin and we say, hey, do you know about the poneglyphs? And you read the one in Alabasta. Do you have any information on this? That'd be really helpful. I feel like one of the Vegapunk satellites could initiate that conversation with her. Let's talk about Joy Boy for a little bit as well, because something that Vegapunk mentions is that Joy Boy wanted the ancient weapons to be passed down. But as far as it goes, the ancient weapons are what's causing the world to sink. And repeated use of them is basically continuing this war that we wanted to end. So it's got me thinking, did Joy Boy and the ancient civilization want the world to sink? And to that degree, is the world government opposing that idea? So is it that the world government is actually trying to keep the world from sinking, which would be in the favor of the civilians, the people that just live on the islands, living peaceful lives, pretty much like basic lives? That would be in their favor. And if the world government was operating in the favor of the people, which it should, not saying it always does, but it should, it would be in their best interest to stop the world from sinking. And in that mindset, they wouldn't necessarily be the bad people. It could very well be a situation where they're well-intentioned extremists, where they have the best intentions for the world at heart, but they're doing what, quote unquote, has to be done to ensure that future. It points very much to how Akainu treated the survivors from Ohara that were leaving the boat, where he was like, anybody leaving this island that has that information is a threat to the world, and we have to eliminate it. And so he eliminates the survivors. It could very much be like that. And speaking of Akainu, it's weird because I never expected him to be as informed as to what's going on as he appears to be in this chapter. So we see him reacting, like getting very upset that Vegapunk's just going to explain everything. Like he's steaming at the mouth, he's got lava pumping, he's not happy about this. But I guess in my mind, it seemed like he was more of an errand boy for the Gorosei. It makes sense that he goes. I saw some people were like, they were kind of banking that Akainu didn't know what was going on, and hearing this news, he would have some kind of revelation about what the world government's doing. He seems to be on the side of whatever they're doing, which I think makes the most sense. He is the absolute justice extremist, and he is the one that they put in this spot for a reason. It's like, yes, he's going to agree with them. That's the whole point. That's the reason he's got this position, because they knew he would agree with it. But I figured that they really wouldn't tell him unless he absolutely needed to know. So it's interesting to see that he's far more aware than I gave him credit for. I want to talk about Roger for a little bit, because Vegapunk talks about how the Roger pirates did not act when they figured out what was going on. And I think for this part, it's really just lack of information on Vegapunk's part. It feels a lot like he's judging the Rogers pirates. He's like, why didn't they do anything? They really heard about this entire story and they just faded into obscurity without doing anything about it. And one, to me, it's like, what would you have them do? What would you have a group of the most infamous and probably hated people in the world do. Because realistically, they can't go around spreading this information. No one's going to believe them, and at most, they're just going to get captured and killed. And two, Vegapunk doesn't know that when they learned this information, they also learned that there was nothing they could do. You know, Ray Lee tells us that when they figured all this out, they were too early. Which makes sense because essentially we were missing key elements to this entire situation. We were missing Poseidon. We were missing Joy Boy. You know, everything wasn't adding up quite yet. So there was really nothing that the Roger Pirates could do. But of course, I think you only know that information if you've made it to Laugh Tale. If not, you can only do what Vegapunk is doing here, and that's kind of just ask why. It's a weird thing to point out because Vegapunk was talking about how he doesn't want to speculate or basically paint one side as bad. But to be like, the Roger Pirates knew about everything and then didn't do anything about it. It feels very pointed. And I think, again, it's very unintentional, but the way the world operates, the way the world sees things, you can even see in the reactions that the people are upset. They're like, why do pirates know the world's secrets? That's dangerous. That's not good. And you can see that they're angry. So it's like, while Vegapunk himself might not be purposely trying to paint a bad light for the Roger Pirates and pirates in general, that's what he's doing in the mind of the people. And it just goes back to, I talked about this a long time ago. Vegapunk doesn't really think about things as far as, you know, how people interact with the world. Because the thing I was talking about a long time ago is that he wanted to give the world all of his knowledge. He wanted all the world to have access to his knowledge. And he really didn't think about the repercussions of what that would mean for everyone to have access to that knowledge. What some people would do with the information and how they could use it to become very powerful and very evil. He doesn't think about that. He thinks about advancement. He thinks about discovery. You know, it just doesn't occur to him that the idea of right and wrong stemming from knowledge. He just sees knowledge as knowledge. That's it. And that comes up to play here again when he's just like, he's giving people knowledge, but he's not thinking about how they're going to react to it. And I also want to focus on York, because York is having like a crisis. York is trying to figure out how this is all planned out, because I mean, it's even like how I was feeling. I had thought that this was more of like a contingency in case something happened. These events would play out. Vegapunk seems to have not only planned for this like perfectly, like timeline wise, he literally set this up to be as in sync with real time as possible. From the point to like talking about the earthquake, talking about Lelusia, having the snail guarded properly, which would essentially mean having Luffy or Joy Boy here. Like, the entire turn of events and how they're playing out seems to be premeditated by Vegapunk. And York has absolutely no idea how this is happening. York even mentions that she stole the Mother Flame. And he's like, how do you know that? There's no way, you shouldn't have the information from my body because I cut off that synchronization. And she also mentions that initially Vegapunk seemed shocked that she was the traitor. And at that point, she's like, well, you're not a good liar and you're not a good actor. So if you weren't really shocked, I feel like I would have noticed. And it brings up a lot of questions to what Vegapunk is doing. This chapter itself, it makes Vegapunk seem a lot more purposeful in what he's sharing and how he's sharing it. Like, this isn't just the world has to know what's going on. This is a call to action, more or less. This is like a very direct call to action for very certain people. I think not only is he kind of pushing the envelope for Joy Boy, I think he's also pushing the envelope for Emu. Basically, the two sides of the war that happened previously, he's trying to push that now. That's what it feels like. Because how else and why else would all of this be happening the way it is? Like, it's perfect isn't the right word, but it's too planned out. Now, I'm wondering, now that they know where the snail is likely going to be, I'm wondering what they can actually do about it. Because the Iron Giant, the Guardian, is ancient technology. Now, this is said to be basically better than anything we have now, and all the weapons they're using aren't working on it. So at this point, there really doesn't seem like there's anything that can stop this creature. And as far as we recall, when the creature was attacking the Holy Land in the past during the Void Century, the only reason it stopped is because it didn't have a power source. Like, technically speaking, it didn't seem like anyone was able to stop it, it ran out of power. And even being out of power, it wasn't destroyed, it just basically shut off. So now that it's back on, is there anything we can realistically do to stop it? Because if the Gorosei are relatively new existences, I don't think they would have the power to stop it. If they existed during the Void Century, we would know they didn't have the power to stop it because they couldn't. I think the only way that the Iron Giant would stop is that if it stops reacting to either the Mother Flame or to the Drum's Liberation. If one of those things like stops giving it its fuel, then it shuts down and they can get past it with ease. I don't think they're just outright destroying it. I think, honestly, the only way that they would be able to deal with something like this, ironically, would be Kuma. Because Kuma could just push it. I see no reason why this, unless it's like made entirely of Kairoseki, I see no reason why Kuma couldn't just push this away. So if push comes to shove, they might be able to have S-Bear use the pawpaw fruit and get rid of it. That would be it'd be really cheap, but a really easy way to get past this. But that's pretty much my thoughts on the chapter. Like I said, I thought this was a very interesting chapter. Like I said before, I know we're getting a lot. I know it's a lot of information dumps and a lot of reaction information dumps, but this is what like the deep One Piece fans kind of live for, is just learning about the world. Because this world is so massive and so interesting that when we get chapters like this, yeah, there's no fighting, there's no who's stronger than who. There's no major, like, outside of information, there's nothing major going on as far as like paneling goes. We're getting info, we're seeing people. Nothing crazy is happening in the paneling. We're just getting crazy info. And personally, I love that kind of stuff. Like, I absolutely love it. So I'm enjoying these chapters so much. Let me know how you guys feel down below. Let me know how you guys feel in the comments, the polls. Like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate you listening, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.